All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor Balakrishna Menon calling and talking from DC School of Management and Technology in Vagamon. We are about 2.5 hours drive from Cochin. I am a professor of marketing here, dealing with management subjects in marketing area of specialization. And the talk for today is project management, the framework and processes. Now, basically, this session is intended for those students in the final year of engineering and management who would like to take a career in project management after their graduation. And basically, one can become a project manager maybe after 2-3 years of experience in the in a company, managing some of the work. And this is also meant as an orientation for young students who would like to pick up this career maybe sometimes later as well. So with that introduction, let us get started. Let us move on to slide number 2, which talks about what is a project. Now basically you would have some idea about what a project is. So for example, the construction of a bridge, construction of a road, or construction of a building, or for that matter your final year or first year projects. Many of the engineering students and management students are picking up a project in the first year and second year as a part of your academic work. So that can also be a project. So what is meant by a project? Now basically a project is a temporary endeavor with a beginning and end. It is to be understood very clearly that when we are talking about a project, it should have definitely a beginning and an end. A continuous activity cannot be termed as a project, because project is one thing which has definitely a beginning and an end. And what is definitely for project? It is creating a unique product, services or result. A project should be able to create a consumer product or an industrial product or a service or some result expected out of your activities. And a project is progressively elaborated. I'll explain this concept a little later. Now let us talk about what is meant by temporary. Temporary means the project has a beginning and an end. It has to have a beginning and end. And when the project objectives are satisfied, reached, we say this is a logical end of the project. And what do you mean by endeavor? It needs to have effort, either in terms of men, material, machine, or work. And what is it creating? It is creating an intention to produce something, which we call as project deliverables. And why is it unique? It is unique in the sense that it is creating a collection of identical items. It is unique in the sense it is not repeatable. Every project is different. And project has tangible objectives, but could include things like computer software, film, or storage works. And it could also be a service, as I was telling. The project can be in terms of creating a consumer product, or it could be in terms of creating a service product. Might include the establishment of a daycare center. For example, if you want to establish a daycare center for taking care of young children, that could be a service project. But think about a daycare center. If somebody has to operate it daily, that is not a project. That is an operation. So there is a difference between a project and an operation. And what is progressive? Progressively means distinguishing characteristics will be progressively detailed, elaborated as the project is better understood. For example, when you start a project in the beginning, you may not have all the requirements, you may not have all the knowledge of doing the project. But as and when you progress it, as and when you progressively proceed, then the more elaborations are coming and you'll be able to understand the project's details much better. So that is why it is progressively elaborated. So that is what a basic definition of a project. Now, how is it distinguishing between a project and operations? Now, on the right side and left side, all the things are equal. It is both things are performed by people. it has got constraints, it is planned and executed. Whereas in the case of project, it is temporary. The tasks are temporary, it has got a definite beginning and an end. Whereas in the case of an operation, it is an ongoing operation, it is never stopped. It is a daily routine kind of operations. And when it comes to projects, it is unique because it is uniquely creating a product or a service or a result. Whereas in the case of operations, it is repetitive. It is talking about daily operations. Say for example, the transportation department of a company, they operate bus service daily. So that's a repetitive task. They do it every day. So that is not a project. So the unique difference between a project and operation is the project is temporary. It has a definite beginning and an end. It is unique because it is producing a project or a service product. Whereas in the case of operations, it is an ongoing task and it is repetitive in nature. Now, this is a question for you. These are some of the examples, buying clothes from the market on a specific sale, or planning for a kid's wedding, building a bridge across the Amazon River, or the cleaning the office building every day. I think in all the first three cases, as you can see, these are distinct activities, distinct tasks having a beginning and an end. Whereas in the last one, it is a routine kind of activity. So the D option is an operations, whereas A, B, and C are clear examples of project. Now some typical types of project. What could be the types of project? It could be a typical information development system, maybe a software project. For example, building the core banking system could be an example of a software project, or construction of a building for that matter, or running a political campaign for an office, or implementing a new business idea, implementing a marketing strategy, implementing a positioning for a product, etc. These are all examples of different types of projects which you can undertake. Now, when we have understood what a project is, then what is meant by project management? Now, project management is essentially the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. And what is the ultimate idea? What is the ultimate goal? It is to project activities to meet or exceed stakeholders' expectations while using resources efficiently and effectively. Who is a stakeholder? Stakeholder is a person or a number of persons who have got specific interest in that particular project. And it is the duty of a project manager to use his resources efficiently and effectively. When we talk about efficiently, it is we have to get the things done within the time budget and the effort budget, that the cost budget. Whereas effectively means we should be able to achieve the objectives enunciated for the project. So the role of a project manager is to make sure that the project is completed efficiently and effectively. Let's move on to the next slide, number 7, which talks about what are the essentials of managing a project. Because we talked about a project now, we talked about project management now, the definition part. Now, what are the essentials of managing a project? Now, the essentials of managing a project includes identifying the requirements. Basically, we need to identify the project requirements in the beginning. As I was telling, it is progressively elaborated. When you start off, you may not have all the requirements, but the requirements are coming in nature, sometimes during different stages of the project. So it is basically to start the requirements where you can at least start the project, the identifying the basic needs, the basic requirements. Then once you identify those requirements, it is a question of establishing clear and achievable objectives. So based on the requirements, you need to clearly define what are the objectives you're going to achieve. And then based on the requirements and the objectives, you need to balance the competing resources. What are the competing resources? It is, you have to manage the quality, you have to manage the scope, you have to manage the time, and you have to manage the cost. And overall, adapting to the specifications. What are the specifications given to you for the project requirements? Then plans, sticking to the plans, the schedules, when the project has to be completed, when it has to be started. So adapting to the plans and concerns of the stakeholders. So from time to time, we may need to address the concerns of the stakeholders, because stakeholders are definitely the people who have a stake in the project and who are funding your project and who has got a special interest in your project. So ultimately, a project is including the requirements finding out, making your objectives clear, balancing the competing resources, and then meeting the specifications and finally achieving the objectives and meeting the concerns of the and goals of the stakeholders. Now we are going to talk about a project management process. As you understand, I don't know whether some of you are familiar with this PMI framework. Now the project management processes are under the framework of PMI. PMI is the Project Management Institute, which is a non-profit body in USA. It has got branches, chapters in different countries. In India, we got a lot of chapters in Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai, Calcutta, Delhi, etc. And in Kerala as well, we have got branches in branches, we call it as chapters in Trivandrum, Cochin, etc. And so the project management processes, which we are going to discuss now, is under the framework of PMI, Project Management Institute, which is a channelizing agency, which is the non-profit making agency, which is a professional body of project managers. So now this framework is defined under PMBOK. PMBOK is the Project Management Book of Knowledge. It has got a standards and specifications. It has got a standard book published by the PMI, and that is a reference guide if somebody wants to pick up the project management as a profession. And in order to become a certified project manager, you have an option to pick up a PMP certification. This is known as Project Management Professional Certification. This is an online examination conducted by the PMI in different chapters. Chapters or sub-chapters have the facility to conduct these examinations. So you can choose a chapter of your own. You can go there. You can register. You can even register online, and then you can do this examination, which is an online one. And once you pass, I think the pass percentage is about 60%, if I remember right. And once you pass, then a certificate is issued to you, and then you become an official PMP certified project manager. So that is the recognition. This is a certification recognized all over the world, and it has got a lot of weightage. And how do you start basically on the PMP certification? Now you have to start as a member of the PMI. You have to start as a member of the Project Management Institute. So how do you do that? You have to pay a one-time registration charge of $10, and then there's an annual membership fee of $129, which you may have to pay every year. And for the PMP examinations, there are two options. If you are a member, that means if you have already paid annual membership fee of $129, then you are eligible for a concessional examination fees, which is $405 for the members. And for the non-members, I think it's a typo error here. This is non-members, it is $555. So there's a little distinction between members and non-members. So this is how you get the PMP certification, and once you are certified, you can quote as if you are a PMP certified project manager, which carries a lot of weight. So this is a whole framework we are going to discuss now. So whatever framework we are going to discuss is under the PMI and the PMBOK. Now the PMI framework, as I was telling, the PMBOK framework has got 5 process groups. If you can see from here, the first process group is initiating processes. Second group is planning processes. Third is executing processes. Fourth one is controlling processes. And fifth one is closing processes. Now if you can see, these processes are very similar to the management processes which you have learned maybe in your management classes, like the initiating, the initiating, planning, organizing, controlling, etc. So some of the things are very closer to what is the management process. So now talking about initiating process, what is meant by initiating process? Initiating process is recognizing when a project or a phase should begin, when should it start, when should it end. So the initiation in connection with the project requirements, the startup, the project kickoff, identifying the stakeholders, etc. that is covered in the initiating processes. Then the planning processes, as we understand, planning is the prime function of any management related activity. So here also planning process is the second in the core groups, five process groups. It is talking about designing and maintaining a scheme which leads successful accomplishment of a project. That means you plan the whole project, starting from how many resources are to be recruited, when the project should start, where is the design. You have to do the whole planning process, and planning process is in all the various stages of the project. It doesn't stop just by once. It's a continuous and evolving process. So planning has to be done continuously, and it has to be monitored. And the third one is the most important part is the execution processes, and execution processes are in connection with the execution of the whole project. Coordinating with different people, controlling resources, carry out the plan which has been enunciated. So execution, the process is actually putting in place, putting in practice, putting into action what has been really planned as in the planning process. And then comes the next process, which is controlling process. As you understand, in the management also, controlling is very essential function. It talks about monitoring and controlling and measuring the progress against the proposed. You may have a plan, and it is very essential that you continuously monitor the progress against the plan, find out the deviation, and if any deviation is there, you need to take corrective actions wherever necessary. So that is what is known as controlling processes. And the last one, but not the least, you may need to close the process. Closing processes, that means you need to close a project when every activity is over. Like analyzing the acceptance of the project. Finally, the project has to be accepted by the stakeholders, and there has to be a signing of project saying the signing of process saying that the project is accepted by the stakeholders, and it will effectively bring in to an end of the project. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, these are the 5 process groups, the core groups of the project management processes: initiating processes, planning processes, executing processes, controlling processes, and closing processes. And if you want to see the linkage between the processes, there is an initiation process, then the planning starts, then the execution starts, and you can see some interconnection, because it means that you may need to plan even in the controlling aspect, and there is an interconnection between the controlling and execution. So there are some interconnection between some of the process groups, but essentially these are the 5 process groups which are under the PMI framework. So having understood the 5 processes, now let us move on to the level of activity and overlap between these processes. As you understand, if you can see the graph, the first one is we are talking about initiating. So this area is the initiating the process group. It has got various tasks in that. And then comes the planning part. So if you can see, there is some amount of intersection, there is some amount of common part between the planning processes and the initiating processes. And when you move on the execution processes, execution also, it requires a lot of planning. So meaning there is some interaction between, there is some intersection between the planning and the execution process. And when you move on to the monitoring, you see the monitoring one, it has got lot of intersection between even the initiation, planning, execution. So this monitoring and controlling, as you can see, it has got intersection with all the processes. And finally, the closing project, before closing project, you have to make sure that all the monitoring and controls have been done, the necessary targets have been achieved. So you can see some amount of interaction between the monitoring and controlling and the closing process group. So this graph shows the level of activity and overlap of processes over the period of time. So as you start from the project till the end, there's a lot of interaction and intersection takes place between these process groups. Move on to the next one. Now we discuss each of the process groups in little more details. Now talking about the project initiation, what do you understand by a project initiation? As we were discussing, it is initiating a project which includes recognizing and starting a new project or project phases. Now the initiation is the phase where the project is decided to start. Somebody has given you a project to start, maybe a project of building a building or constructing a road or constructing a bridge or whatever it is. So it should have a definite start, it should have a definite end. And each of these, the project will have a lot of phases as well. The initiation phase itself is a phase. Then requirements phase where you build up the requirements, understand the requirements, elaborate the requirements, firm the requirements, sign off the requirements. Then you move on to the designing part, how the requirements can be converted into a design. As in the case of a building, for example, once the requirements are understood, maybe how many floors, how many lifts, etc. And then the whole thing has to be designed, and that is what you call as a blueprint. So design is something like a blueprint of the whole project. And once you have the design, then the construction starts, the individual pieces being constructed, and the validation and verification. These are two processes. I mean, inside the initiation process, validation is talking about whether you finished all the things according to the requirements, whether it is validating the requirements, whether it is completed. And verification is whether it is completed successfully, where all the things, whether whatever scope has been covered, whether it is totally covered. Verification is validation is whatever you have done, whether it has been done correctly. Suppose a project has 10 steps, whether all the 10 steps have been completed successfully. And verification is whether all the 10 steps are enough to complete your scope. So verification is a cross-checking of whether your scope has been totally completed and covered. And of course the implementation part thereafter, and then the closure. So these are the distinct project phases which can be talked about, and each of them will have a separate initiation process. And some of the organizations might use a pre-initiation phase. So for example, before you start the initiation process group itself, there could be a pre-initiation. For example, the startup work, the pre-initiation process, like getting the planning part of it, arranging, organizing, whatever it is. A pre-initiation phase can be thought about, while others include items as developing a business case or a part. So for example, when you're starting a project, before starting a project, somebody has to tell you that there is a business requirement. So the basic start point could be a business requirement phase, which has to be built up. In some cases, the client might ask you to develop the requirements even, which can be taken as a pre-initiation phase. So basically the main goal of this initiation phase, initiation process, is to formally select and start off the project. So it may include probably a start-off meeting or a kick-off meeting. And what are the basic deliverables out of it? And friends, in each of the phases, each of these process core groups, there has to be a deliverable part. So what are the deliverables in the project initiation process? It is assigning a project manager. At this phase, you must be able to assign the company who is given the go ahead for the project. The company or the officials or the chief executive has to assign a project manager who can do this project. And identifying the stakeholders. Who are the main stakeholders? Whether the government or the external agencies. Who are the key stakeholders? So we need to identify all the stakeholders. And completing a business case, at least what is a business function to be covered? What is a business function to be included in this project? So that needs to be completed. And of course, we need to complete a project charter and getting the signature on it. So what is meant by a project charter? In the next slide, I'll get you the details. So essentially, these are the main deliverables of the project initiation phase. So let us move on to find out what is a sample of a project charter. So this is a typical project starter. I think the font size is a little lower. I don't know whether you can read this. Now it talks about a project title. It talks about a project start date and end date. Then it talks about the project manager who is assigned. And it talks about the project objectives which are supposed to be achieved. It talks about the approaches which you can take for doing this project. And basically the key stakeholders, what are their roles and responsibilities. These are the key people, their roles and responsibilities. And moving on, the signature from the above stakeholders, the stakeholders which have identified earlier, their roles and responsibilities. And they need to sign off saying that, this is a project assigned to this particular project manager and the company. And there can be a series of comments here saying that the project has to be completed within 1 year or whatever it is. And so this is basically a project charter. So the project charter talks about essentially then in a nutshell on the framework, on the whole, the structure of this project, the title, objectives, etc. And what are the project initiation documents? Now, as I was telling, as we were discussing, before starting a project or in the initiation phase, you must have a business case. Business case is what the functional requirements, what are essentially meant to be achieved in this project. This may be given as a requirement by the stakeholder or maybe the project sponsor, and the charter we discussed about it. And every organization has its own variables of what documents are required. As we have discussed some of the documents, there could be some variations from organizations to organizations, because many organizations might customize some of these project documents, some of these initiation documents. So there could be some variations, but whatever be the variation, what documents are required for initiate a project. And it is after all important to identify the project need, the stakeholders, and the main goals. So whatever be the variations, ultimately, essentially, you should identify the project need. What is the need of the project? Why should we do this project? Who has given this project? What is the benefit of this project? Who are the stakeholders? And what are the main goals to be achieved by this project? We move on to the next phase, the project planning phase. The project planning phase is basically meant to guide the execution of the project. Now, the key outputs at this stage is it is that we should have a team contract. The team consisting of what are the team members and how do they behave. I mean, what is their roles and responsibilities. And there has to be a team contract saying that we are doing this project on behalf of so and so. Starting date, ending date, so there has to be a contractual obligation between the sign-off party, I mean the person who is giving you the project, and the people who are taking the project. So a team contract has to be signed off, and a scope document has to be initiated as to what is in scope and what is out scope. In many times there may be a confusion as to whether a particular piece of job is or piece of construction is in the scope or not. So it is very essential that the scope document should clearly define and distinguish what is in scope and what is out of scope. If you are not clear whether a particular thing is to be included or not, you better make sure that it is either in or out. I mean, if you are sure that this is not to be included, then make it clear, saying that the scope does not include this particular piece of work. And the next important output of this phase is, the planning phase is work breakdown structure. As we all understand, the work breakdown structure is the main tasks are subdivided into various, minutest piece of information, piece of tasks which can be broken down into a manageable unit and which can be assigned to resources. And of course, a project schedule. Project schedule is a document which talks about the number of tasks, the start date and end date of each of the tasks, and it can be in the form of a Gantt chart with all dependencies and resources entered. I'll typically show you in the next screen, I'll typically show you a project schedule, and thereafter we should have a list of prioritized risks. As we all understand, in a project there will be risks, there will be a lot of risks which is to be covered. So we'll talk about a project schedule and a project risk as a part of project planning. Now this is a typical example of a project plan which is done in Microsoft Project Plan software. Now if you can see, there are various process groups. Under that, subtasks are defined, and each of the tasks you can define a start date, you can define an end date, and you can define a particular resource for that particular task. And some of you might be familiar in the Microsoft Project Plan. It can talk about, it can tabulate how the resource loading is done, how many resources are required, how many resources are involved, what is the loading pattern, how many hours they are working in a day, So all those things can be chalked out here. So basically this is talking about the whole task, broken down into subtasks and then tagged to a resource with a start date and end date. So this is what is basically a project plan, and this is the Gantt chart version of a project plan. And moving on to the risk factor, we were talking about the risk because every project will have risk. So it is necessary to identify what are all the risks and then rank them according to the priorities. So for example, the rank number 1, it talks about lack of input from internal consultants, maybe the highest risk. So it is not only enough to tabulate all the risks, we need to also have the mitigation plan. Mitigation plan is a plan as to how this risk will be tackled if at all it happens. A risk, if it really happens, it becomes an issue, and then the issue will have to be tackled separately. So essentially, as a part of project planning, we need to identify the risks in the order of ranking, and also we need to have the mitigation plans as to how would you overcome this risk if at all it happens. So these are the two very essential documents in the planning phase. We move on to the execution phase. In the execution phase, we talk about, this is the most important part, and it takes much longer time rather than the planning and initiation and other activities. So this is basically the construction phase. You are executing the project as it is planned. And here the project managers must be able to use their leadership skills to handle many challenges. As you understand, as the project progresses, there will be many challenges. Some of the challenges which you may not have even tagged in your risk tracker. Some challenges might crop up suddenly. So then again, you have to go back and update your risk tracker. So the challenges is an ongoing thing in any job. So in project management as well, as we understand, a lot of challenges will be upcoming. And it is the role of a project manager to see that those challenges are tackled during the project execution. And basically you can adopt two approaches, MBO and MBE. MBO stands for management by objectives, and MBE stands for management by exception. You should be always focused on your objectives. If it is to the objective, if everything goes according to the objectives, that's fine. You can be comfortable. Or if there are exceptions, how will you handle that exceptions? You can use these two principles of management to tackle those challenges as and when the project execution takes place. And during the execution phase or during any other phase, the project sponsors and customers who have a stake in the project, they may be mainly concentrating, they may be mainly focused on the deliverables. Whatever deliverables you're supposed to provide as a project manager, maybe in relation to the products which you are building up, or in relation to the service product you are building up, or in relation to the results which are expected out of the project. So the stakeholders are not worried about anything else. They are just worried about the main deliverables you are supposed to give as a part of your project. And also you can have a milestone report which you can keep track on, focusing the completion of various milestones. This will help you to track, the project can be divided into various milestones. If it is a huge project involving years or months of effort, probably it is advisable to split the task into the major milestones so that you can track each of the milestones and monitor accordingly. So let's go to the next slide, which talks about a critical milestone report. The project manager the planning, the planning part, some of the tasks are assigned to the project manager itself. Say for example, determination or assigning the project, business case creation, etc. And then the various phases, planning, what do you call core processes, planning, executing, controlling, etc. So you can have various milestones. You can define various milestones here so that you can track it and then you can monitor it. You can also assign a responsibility, and if there are any issues, concern, that can also be tracked. Let us move on to the next phase, which is talking about project monitoring and controlling. As we all understand, some of you are management students, you understand the monitoring and controlling is very essential as a part of your management process. So in case of project management as well, this is one of the most important part. You may have to manage and monitor. It involves measuring the progress towards the actual defined task. So on a continuous basis, maybe on a daily basis, day-to-day basis, you must be able to measure what has progressed against the proposal. Yeah, so an actual comparison has to be made against the planned. So planned and actual need to be compared towards the project deliverables or the project objectives. Monitoring the deviations. In many cases, deviations could occur. I mean, in the project execution part or planning part, any of the phases or any of the core processes, there could be room for deviation. Deviation could happen. So it is the duty of a project manager to monitor the deviation from the plan and take corrective actions. The corrective actions to be taken so that the project is back on the rails, back on track. And it affects all our process groups. As we have seen, the project monitoring and controlling core processes, as we have seen the overlap graph, it has got a connection. It has got an intersection with many of the earlier processes like initiation, execution, and others, planning, and etc. So since it affects all the groups, it needs to be continuously managed. It needs to be continuously monitored during the whole phases of project life cycle. Project life cycle is what we discussed about: initiation,